How unreasonable fear cost some Black Americans their lives. This is by David French out of the Times article. And so I'm reading this. And so if you're not familiar with these three young men, you will be in this article. So I'm going to read it. So how unreasonable fear cost some Black Americans their lives. So if you closely follow the twists and turns in many of the most recent high-profile shootings of Black men, you'll notice patterns. First, only the slightest, smallest level of alleged misconduct or suspicious behavior is used to justify the killer's unreasonable fear. And second, even after the smoke clears, all too many members of the public will understand, forgive, and perhaps even share that deadly terror. So Americans still impose upon Black men the burden of their own unbalanced sense of risk. The injustice of the singular act of the shooting is magnified by a collective acceptance and defense of the shooter's extraordinary alarm. The patterns apply to the shooting of Ahmaud Arbery. The known facts of the case are simple and startling. On the afternoon of February the 23rd, two Georgia men, Travis and Gregory McMichael, saw Arbery running past their home. According to the police report in the case, these men thought that he looked like a suspect in recent break-ins. So they armed themselves with shotguns and a handgun along with a third man and gave chase in two vehicles. Eventually they concerned Arbery. They cornered Arbery, and one vehicle drove behind him, its driver filming the whole encounter. And so the McMichaels parked the truck in front of him, blocking his path forward. And when he tried to run around that truck, Travis McMichael moved to intercept, holding his shotgun. So Arbery and Travis scuffled, and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation said that Travis shot Arbery's, killing him. The video was very shocking. All of us saw the video. And so why would these men arm themselves and chase down a young man in shorts and a t-shirt who held no visible weapon? Gregory McMichael told the police that they thought he might be armed. Why? Because they seen him once put his hands down his pants. So that is the very definition of unreasonable fear. So as the case gained widespread public attention, evidence emerged that Ahmaud Arbery had likely been in a construction site shortly before he was shot. A 911 caller said that he saw a man in an open, unfurnished house. So a video feed showed someone who looked like Ahmaud Arbery standing in the construction site. So there was no immediate evidence that he had committed any crime. So he had simply stood in an empty, open building of a construction site, and something countless curious Americans do as a matter of course. And so yet that very allegation, as innocuous as it is, was enough for some conservatives to come to Michael's defense. For example, conservative commentator Tommy Lauren compared the claim that Arbery was just out jogging to the false claim that Michael Brown had his hands up when he was fatally shot in Ferguson, Missouri. Another conservative commentator, Candace Owens, attacked the claim that Arbery was just a jogger and said that he was caught on camera breaking into an unfurnished property. But even if this was true, that action is no way to justify an armed two-car pursuit, and it certainly doesn't permit private citizens to attempt to seize Arbery at gunpoint. So that's not the only trivial action or suspicion that contributed to a deadly attack. I'll never forget the extraordinary statement of Geronimo Yanez, the officer who shot and killed a young black man named Philandro Castile during a traffic stop after Castile told Yanez that he was lawfully carrying a firearm. It's hardly unusual for most motorists to lawfully carry a firearm. The video of the encounter shows that Castile was complying with Yanez's instructions when he was shot. That same video shows Yanez rapidly escalating the encounter as well. So what was one reason Yanez became so instantly afraid? Why was he so immediately convinced that a calmly speaking Castile or Philando Castile was a deadly threat? Because Yanez smelled marijuana? Yanez told investigators that if Castile has the guts and the audacity to smoke marijuana in front of the 5-year-old girl and risk her lungs and risk her life by giving her secondhand smoke, and the front seat passenger doing the same thing, then what? What care does he give about me? And lest anyone believe that Yanez's statement was too unreasonable to truly believe, recall that a Minnesota jury acquitted him of second-degree manslaughter charges. There are just too many tragic examples. You remember the killing of Walter Scott. He was shot in the back in 2015 in South Carolina. A police officer named Michael Slager, as Scott fled from a scuffle. He was an unarmed black man, of course. I'm adding that in there. And why did the officer shoot an unarmed black man in the back? I was scared, Slager told the jury. He said that in his mind was total fear. A 33-year-old cop was terrified of a 50-year-old man running away from him. So one of the most tragic fatal confrontations in the recent U.S. history, the killing of Trayvon Martin, began when George Zimmerman called 911 to report that Martin looks like he's up to no good, or he's on drugs or something. It's raining and he's just walking around looking about. That was the sight that led an armed man to follow a teenager, and there were no weapons visible. Martin was unarmed. So there was no evidence of any criminality. When the case dominated public attention, a number of right-wing sites combed through Martin's history, publicized evidence of past drug use of speculated and whether he was a drug dealer. And so they were looking for a reason to justify Zimmerman's pursuit. As Michael Singleton recalls in the Washington Post, Geraldo Rivera went so far as to identify Martin's hoodie as a material factor in his death. If he didn't have that hoodie on, Rivera argued, that nutty neighborhood watch guy wouldn't have responded in a violent and aggressive way. The legal outcomes of these cases vary. A hung jury protected Slager before he pleaded guilty to a federal civil rights offense, and juries acquitted Yanez and Zimmerman, and the Arbery murder case is right now pending. And the Michaels having been arrested in May, juries acquitted Yanez and Zimmerman. But each case was dominated by obvious outsized perception of threat and danger. And rather than rightly being seen as a badge of shame, the shooter's paranoia actually unites their defenders in righteous indignation. So how can this be? In part because a part of the U.S. population shares the same perception of threat as the shooters themselves. They look at the McMichaels and sympathize with their armed pursuit. They think it was justified or just fine for Zimmerman to follow Martin. And if police officers felt afraid, who are they to second guess the boys in blue? So put in another way, there are Americans who would never pick up a weapon and try to track down a black man running on a street or follow a young black man on a rainy night, but they all seem to understand and sympathize with those who do. There is no easy cure for an unbalanced sense of risk, but one can flood the zone with statistics about reduced crime. Juries can hold cowardly killers accountable. Outrageous video clips can raise awareness and slowly open eyes, but at the end of the day, the battle is over the state and the human heart. Make no mistake, hearts can change. There was a time when my own first instinct was to disbelieve that injustice and prejudice could still be so profound. Surely I would think there was the rest of the story. And yes, sometimes initial reports of police or citizen misconduct were wrong. But all too often, those reports of misconduct were right. All too often, they are right in the fact that those reports are right so often, with so many Americans defending indefensible, that I really realized that all too many of these cases carried with them a dreadful double injustice. So there was an awful death itself, and then there was the public declaration that there was something right about alarm and even terror that triggered deadly violence. So it's that second injustice that helps perpetuate the cycle of violence, and it teaches a new American generation that when black men do even the smallest or slightest things, then there is a reason to grab a gun and even to fire that gun. The battle for hearts and minds must continue. It must be relentless and urgent until at long last there is no real market for rationalization. After all, there is no reason a walk through a neighborhood at night or through an open construction site or a whiff of marijuana in a car could create any American that terrible and fatal sense of unreasonable fear. I thought this was a really well written out article in terms of thinking about it in that sense, because I noticed there is a pattern with all of these killings. And what bothers me about this is that, I'm going to repeat this again. I'm reading a book, and the book is called The New Jim Crow. And for those of you that don't know what this book is, some people already do, so it may have different covers, but this is the book that I've been reading, and it really pretty much points out some of the same things that are going on right as of now. And it's by Michelle Alexander. It's called The New Jim Crow, and it talks about mass incarceration in the age of colorblindness. And it pretty much points out some of the same atrocities that are happening right now in real time, with the Ahmaud Arbery killing, and with some of the other things that I've noticed that have been happening as of now, with the killings of black males, black females alike. And so it seems like there's a pattern for each killing, and it's always justified by conservatives or people who are right-wing or people who are just plain out, biased and prejudiced or racist or maybe all of the above. And they seem to justify every killing to make themselves feel comfortable for what they've done. And you even have people from the same background, if they fit into that mold of being a conservative, they seem to paint that broad brush on everyone, and like you're up to no good, or why do you smell like that, or why are you running, you must have done something, why are you reaching in your pants, and you're reaching for a cell phone, or maybe you're reaching for your ID, or maybe you're trying to reach for your keys. It's always looked at as, this justifies shooting and killing a human life, and there's no real justification for it. It's just, they're just kind of reaching for straws and trying to build a case to make it seem as though that these killings are justified, and not one of them have I found is justified, not a one. And so I think that this book really pretty much breaks down the justice system and how it has failed Black Americans all the way from the beginning all up to now. And it just really pretty much is the blueprint of what has been going on. And I have to say that it's really scary, and a lot of the stuff that I've been reading, it's not made up, because some of these things that are in this book, I was living through that time. I've seen this stuff happen, or I've heard of this stuff from my parent, that has, since passed. But it's just really sad, because it's a truth telling about how American justice doesn't work for every group. And anyway, I'm going to let this video go. So this, I thought I would bring up the cover. This is how my cover looks of the book. And so it's just really sad. But right now, the Arbery case is pending. I was reading another article about it earlier, and his attorney, Mr. Crump, is right now trying to work on that case. So I didn't really want to talk about that article, because I didn't want to interfere with what's going on into that. But this right here is definitely a pattern that I've seen all too many times, even with the killings before these young men. It just seems like it's the same story over and over again, and not a one of these killings has any justifiable cause as to why they would let these people go free or exonerate them. But somehow they have a way of making this system of justice work in their favor, so that they can get away with murdering innocent Black males and females, Black Americans alike, for any reason whatsoever. And it's just, it really points to this, what this term is. This is like the new Jim Crow, and we really haven't gotten away from all of those old ways. We just got new people doing the same thing. And so anyway, I'm gonna let this video go. That's my opinion on this. I don't see it any other way, and that's the way it is, So having said that, I'm going to let this video go. You can look at this article. The title of it is Unreasonable Fear. That's what I'm going to entitle this video. Thanks for listening.